Hey everybody, welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host Valerie, and I have Nathan with me today, and we are so excited to wrap up this really intense 5-part series that really dips deeply into the Latter-day Saint Faith Crisis Survey that was done about 10 years ago and presented to the general leadership of our church, that not only states the problems, what we are experiencing, many of us are experiencing worldwide and churchwide, in the realm of faith crisis. So it actually really does a good job of laying out the problems, but also in making some fantastic suggestions about how we can heal and work and do better as a church in helping people have a healthier relationship with the church and overcome this issue of faith crisis. Okay, so I'm going to just jump in and I'm going to talk you through. Well, I'm going to just summarize what this team of researchers actually talked about as far as, okay, this is what the challenges that we here have studied and what we want to overcome. So this is what they're calling the challenge. Number 1, faith crisis is a viral challenge affecting individuals, families, and ward communities worldwide. Okay, challenge number 2, today, faith crisis let me start that over again. Today, faith crisis is being driven primarily by uncorrelated content propagated by social media. Point number 3, the Mormon moment will continue the presentation of uncorrelated information to our membership. If you want to know more about the Mormon moment, I encourage you to go back 2 episodes where I go very deeply into what the Mormon moment is. And
3 episodes, right?
3 episodes?
Yeah, I think it's 3 episodes.
Oh, we're on 5. Okay, on sorry, I keep confusing my words. On the second in the series of 5.
Episode number 2.
So not actually episode number 2, but series number 2. I don't know what the number
That's
of the
true.
episode is. Okay.
Number 2 in this series.
Yeah, sorry. If that wasn't super confusing, I don't know what else is. Okay. And finally, point number 4 of our challenge is this. Unless bold measures are taken to treat those in faith crisis and to mitigate the challenges for future generations, significantly more Latter-day Saint families will become impaired and the future success of the church will be at risk. Well, we already know it's already at risk. 10 years has gone by and very little has been done. We are grateful for those, for the publication of a lot of documents that are they're available, but they're not very accessible. And of course, we have the essays, the gospel topics essays. And yet I'm here to say, I think we could do better and we could do more. And this team is actually going to talk us through how we could do better.
Okay, so in our last episode, we talked about this cycle of disaffection, which is sort of the internal emotional experience that people have when they discover church history for themselves through the uncorrelated sources. We talked about the sense of betrayal that they feel, and then the subsequent distancing that they feel from family members and church members as they feel like they're almost kind of on their own. We have to learn to break this cycle. We have to figure out how to help people learn the truth for themselves and also feel like they can still be part of a community, that they're still loved and cared for, and that it's okay to have different experiences and differences of opinion. So some of their thoughts on this and mitigating this faith crisis for future generations. Mitigating faith crisis for future generations is possible, but will require bold steps. The key is to ensure future generations no longer become shocked by gaps between official LDS narratives and the uncorrelated history. And then we also have to treat those who do get shocked.
Okay, so we're talking about present problems and future problems here. That's kind of what this team is narrowing down, is we've got the present people that are actively traumatized and being treated very, very poorly, who are in active faith crisis because this problem has not been addressed yet. And then it's saying, okay, we need to deal with this in the here and now, you and me listening to this podcast, right? And then we need to do better so that our children later on do not become future trauma victims and future sufferers of faith and trust crisis. So this is the two directions that this team is encouraging. Let's deal with the problems that we've caused that are causing pain now, and let's mitigate more pain that our children will not have to suffer if we actually institute these strategies and suggestions. Okay, so Nathan and I are now going to go through what this team came up with in the way of suggestions for what the church could actually do to prevent to mitigate as much as possible current suffering and to prevent future suffering. Okay. So recommendation number 1 is that we need to close the history gap. Okay. So what they offer as their insight is this. I'm going to go ahead and quote it because I could not summarize this better. They say this: the gap between the history currently taught and the factual history is, in certain instances, highly differentiated. Okay. There are 2 separate stories. And we need to close that gap. Okay, so the strategy that they recommend is inoculate current membership and future generations by closing the gap between our historical narrative and factual history. So we need to actually stop talking about the fairy tale version of our church history and actually start talking about what really happened. Okay, now then they offer several possible tactics. And as I was reading through these, some of them felt maybe a little bit more realistic than other things, but just in the spirit of reading what their recommendations are, I think I'll start by not weighing in with my own little arrogant opinion. So here we go. Okay, one of the tactics is have members of the First Presidency deliver major addresses to all CES leadership and staff that make it clear that there is an urgent obligation for CES or Church Educational System employees to teach church history openly and honestly within a faith-based context. Now, that is a big ask, but once again, it can be taught within a faith-based context by allowing for all of the problems that have occurred that have not been owned to have been activated by human beings that need an atonement. I don't know any other way to be both truthful and faith-based. Nathan, is there any other way to do that other than basically to say they're human? And
I think that's exactly what you have to say.
Yeah.
And I like how they're trying to pass it off to the CES. I think you need the CES people on board, but I don't know why the general authorities can't say the same thing.
Yeah, we're giving it to the C team.
Yeah,
like the CES team.
That's what Paul Toscano said. He's like, why do the apostles hand this off to the B team? Why can't they also be involved in being truthful? So
right. Well, I think it addresses that here in a second. So let's see if that actually does emerge. I'm hoping it does. Okay, another possible tactic is in an expeditious manner, update CES and other church manuals and curricula with more currently depict church history. Collaborate with respected non-church employed historians to add credibility. We have to outsource some things. We can't be sort of inbred as much as we historically have, because what that does is it causes a bit of an echo chamber effect. If we're really, really interested and concerned in our own image, we keep everything inbred. We keep everything that is produced through church employees, which then causes the problem that we are, of course, in right now, because they are very protective of their image rather than in the perpetuation of truth. Okay, another tactic is openly publish official position papers on difficult historical and doctrinal topics. Now, I'm wondering if that's because this was, of course, a recommendation back in the day, back 10 years ago.
Joseph Smith papers out.
Well, and the gospel topics.
Yeah, I mean, the gospel topics essays is a good start. Publishing the Joseph Smith papers is something. I mean, that getting it out there where people can find it on the internet is something.
I think it is something, and I'm glad that they did it, but I'm a voracious reader and I've never tapped into the Joseph Smith papers. I think it needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Rather than it needs to not be sort of hidden in something that's 9,000 pages long.
Well, then you'd say the same thing about the gospel topics essays.
Right.
Because you have to go hunting for them to find them, even in the church's website.
Right. Okay. So it says here, if known answers are inconclusive, concede uncertainty and advance multiple viable answers, including those that may be uncomfortable for the church.
Yes.
I want to highlight that and underscore that. Okay. The next one is strategically identify difficult issues already being highlighted in the church's Joseph Smith papers. So the papers must have been out before this came, because they're talking about them as a recommendation. And finally, place church history back into the adult curriculum in Relief Society and priesthood classes and provide members a framework for better understanding complicated church history. Well, the essence of this is we just need to own the messy of our church history. It ain't pretty. And we just have to own it because it's actually there. It's out there. It's being found out through unofficial sources, which is why the betrayal.
Right.
If the church actually owns it and teaches it themselves, then they will mitigate a lot of betrayal trauma to future generations and actually really help in the healing process of people who have felt betrayed, because the church will be finally being accountable.
Yeah. So closing the gap is designed to try to help people not get into faith crisis. But now what do you do when you have those who are in faith crisis? Well, one of their first suggestions is that we need to have better ways to support them. They call it consoling the individuals in faith crisis. They feel betrayed, they feel abandoned. And so what is the strategy? Well, we need to train leaders, and both general and local leaders and general membership, on how to acknowledge and support brothers and sisters in faith crisis. So they suggest, number one, we could have some conference talks and other communications from our general leaders that tries to change the narrative about being more empathetic and understanding and loving and reaching out to people in faith crisis. We need to encourage leaders not to exclude members from callings, even when they experience faith crisis. And I've seen that actually. I remember a story about a gentleman in San Francisco who was homosexual. And when he went through a period in his life where he was not with a partner, a bishop made him his first counselor and said, dude, I want your insights. I want your things. And the bishop was walking this line between, you can't be actively practicing homosexual and hold a calling. But as soon as he, hit that little spot, the bishop said, come. And he brought him in. And it wasn't with the intention of changing him. And that was really important, because the man who was giving the report on this said, I just felt genuinely loved by this bishop. He wanted my insights. He wanted to know how to see the LGBT community differently. And I thought it was great. I thought it was a really good example of a bishop that could see outside of the church's narrative on these things. Develop and provide local leaders with specific resources and materials to instruct them on what not to say and what to say. The next one is, instead of encouraging faith crisis members to stop thinking and stop reading about issues, encourage them to thoroughly research issues and then provide them a safe place to talk about them. Publicly acknowledge that leaders are listening to those with concerns. Acknowledge and not dismiss the existence of the faith crisis and these issues. And finally, their last suggestion was, consider an outreach initiative in which general authorities will meet with disaffected members in compassion and love.
Can I just say something that occurs to me as I'm listening to this? Is if my not mine, but the point number one, the first points that I was just reading a minute ago, where we closed the gap, if and when that actually happened, and if it was done correctly, what that ought to actually do, it would actually catapult the entire church into a faith crisis.
Right.
And if it did that, then I think would be the first possible step for our healing. Because if everybody doesn't actually go through the process of grieving and feeling the rage and all of the betrayal, trauma, and things like that, and overcoming it, and learning how to be more psychologically and spiritually whole to manage massive amounts of complexity in their faith journey, until they get to that part, what you're describing here is going to be ineffective. In other words, if there are Orthodox people trying to do these sort of outreach efforts to people in faith crisis, but they're doing it from a place of superiority or smugness or judgment, that we're trying to save you because you're somehow broken or wounded, rather than you're actually ahead of me in my spiritual development. In other words, it's not going to work out unless the ones doing the ministry are the ones that are actually further along in their faith development journey.
Right.
Are you capturing what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I totally am.
Yeah.
So the problem is that there aren't very many of those people. What you really need is people who are in stage 4 of spiritual development to sort of initiate this. And there are very few people in stage 4 of spiritual development. And so I think that's one of the issues that you've got here, is that who can really lead this charge without what you just described? And that is, you got to get it out there, and you got to push everybody into the spiritual crisis.
Well,
we all have to go through it.
Yes.
We all have to experience it. And then when we've all experienced it, we can turn around and support each other.
Well, we would be supporting each other as equals.
Right.
And I think that's what the problem is up to this point, is that even what they're describing to me seems problematic a little bit, because the orthodoxy wants to believe that they are saving us from ourselves in our faith crisis.
Right.
And that's not going to work, because the orthodoxy simply doesn't understand.
Right.
And
there's no empathy there.
Right. Let me just mention, you guys, when Nathan talks about stage 4, just backstory there, you're going to want to go back to episode number 33 of this podcast. And it actually is, that's kind of just dinner table talk for us, but it is something that if you read or listen to that episode, you will understand the 4 stages of spiritual development that Nathan and I frequently reference in talking about how to become fully grown up in the, working towards truly being made over in the image of God through our own human development. Okay, so let's move on to how we can. So first, we talked about closing the gap. Then Nathan second talked about how to take care of and console individuals in faith crisis. I'm going to move to their third recommendation, which is how to support families in faith crisis. I feel really strongly about this one. I feel strongly about a lot, but here's just another one that I feel strongly about. Okay, the insight that they give here is that currently a spouse in faith crisis often results in damaged or destroyed marriages and traumatized families. I'm going to say that differently because that doesn't feel very clear to me. Basically, faith crises frequently end marriages. The believing spouse feels like the honorable thing to do when his or her partner moves into faith crisis. They believe that because this is costing them their exaltation, and it really bumps into a lot of their own sort of sense of identity, purpose, meaning in life, they actually feel to betray the trust that they have in their marriage, and they choose the church over the partner. Whew, okay, that's messed up. Sorry. Okay, the strategy that they give in mitigating this problem is counsel families to stay together and to support each other despite the faith crises that are going on. What this really calls for, you guys, is a restructuring of what it means to be in faith crisis. Faith crisis is progress. It's somebody growing closer to God. That should not be a call for divorce. That should be celebrated.
Yes.
Okay. Possible tactics that they recommend in helping families stay together and support one another rather than falling apart because of faith crisis. These are the tactics they recommend. Through conference talks and outbound communications, communicate that faith crisis in and of itself is not a valid reason for divorce. Tactic number 2, counsel those members in faith crisis to allow their believing spouses to participate fully in the church and to not undermine the believing spouse's faith. Now, that is a big deal too, because this can go both ways. Meaning that sometimes if somebody has some awakening and they're in that anger phase, they may actually cajole or bully or guilt or shame their partner into joining them in their own disaffection, which is just as inappropriate as the believing partners trying to blame or shame the one that's struggling with faith crisis into their way of thinking. So what we're talking about here is this concept of healthy individuation in the marriage, meaning that while we choose one another, we want to be in connection with and grow together in this beautiful journey that is our joint life together, we allow the autonomy of the other to be where they are in their faith journey. Okay. Not an easy ask, but it is possible. And then point number 4, this is tactic number 4 they give to help support families as they navigate faith crisis within their own home is this: create an online-based faith crisis hotline in which believing and faith crisis spouses and family members can call a professional specifically trained in dealing with faith crisis issues. Okay, I'm having a little bit of a moment here because I know what these hotlines have done before in our church. And so my hope would be that in this case, if they were to institute this, this would be trained, qualified mental health professionals that are really far along in their own spiritual development journeys that could truly actually help both the person in faith crisis and the person in orthodoxy who is struggling with their partner in faith crisis, helping them truly navigate and allow them both to be where they are, and not simply somebody that is going to somehow protect the church or protect the orthodoxy, which of course would then would be more damaging.
Yeah, or try to fix the person in faith crisis, because the problem is that with a lot of the church counselors is that they have been handed an agenda, which is not to be a professional counselor according to their understanding of psychological independence and agency, but rather an agenda to bring the struggling person back to looking a certain way.
Well, it's all about, yes, I could not agree with you more, Nathan. It's really, as much as anything, it's about making sure that there is no other agenda other than the psychological and spiritual health of each individual. It's not about bringing them back into the fold. It's not about saving their souls. It's not about protecting the church. It's really about helping each individual be safe and healthy and live an integrity-based life. If that truly is our agenda, we are actually on the errand of God, because that's all that God is interested in for each of us, is to become the most whole and healthy versions of ourselves, independent of the relationship that we have with the institution.
Yeah. Okay. And so we've talked about how to work on this problem. Number one is closing the information gap, being more truthful. Number two, helping individuals who are in faith crisis. Number three is helping families that are in faith crisis. So their fourth idea here is to provide pastoral counseling to doubters. The insight says this: some members in faith crisis may lose their moral compass upon evaporation of their beliefs. Providing pastoral counseling helps those, regardless of their belief system, to retain their moral standards. So we've talked about how, unfortunately, sometimes people tie their faith in God or their faith in morality to their faith in the church. And if their faith in the church crumbles, sometimes they unnecessarily lose the trust that they have developed in God or their moral compass.
They actually become destructive sometimes.
Yeah.
Self-destructive.
And it doesn't need to be that way. So what we're saying here is that we need to find a way to help them lose their faith in the church and yet still maintain their own integrity in their belief with God or a moral compass. So reinforcing morality as using wider traditions or principles for people who've lost their faith. So in other words, you don't have to be Mormon to believe in certain moralities. Okay. They are in fact self-evident.
Well, they're what it means to be children, to be divine
in nature. Divine, right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's not tied to any institution at all.
So number two is to provide guidance for non-believing members that allows them to constructively interact with believing members of the church or family members. Number three is to provide access to trained mental health professionals to alleviate anxiety and to develop this framework. And I emphasize trained mental health professionals here because this is really important. We're not talking about bishops. We're not talking about stake presidents. We're not talking about people who are thrust into positions unprepared and untrained for these kinds of things. We're talking about mental health professionals, counselors who are trained and know how to handle these situations and don't have an agenda to bring people back to look a certain way.
Well, and I would go so far as to say I would want them to be trauma informed, meaning that these folks that do this pastoral care have a really good understanding of what trauma is, how it's caused, and how to heal from it, and how to get someone from a place where they have experienced active trauma in this or other ways, and how to actually, there are processes that trauma therapists have learned, myself included, which actually really access how do I say this? It's a certain way of doing therapeutic work that changes the neural pathways in the brain and helps the brain heal itself. That's the kind of thing that is a special skill set. And the other thing that I would I want to highlight that you're just talking about, Nathan, is it's so important that we really come to a deep understanding of how generous God is in housing truths everywhere. Mm-hmm. We're talking in every religious tradition and spiritual tradition out there. I am a huge disciple and advocate of a lot of the Eastern traditions. I have read a lot in Buddhism and in Hinduism, and I find some of my closest relationships with God through the conduits of those those faith traditions because they are also absolutely legitimate sources of pure intelligence and truth. And so especially for people that, well, it's really good for all of us, but especially when we have trauma that is faith-based through our own institution, it's very, very good to find these. They're very, very refreshing to see how God speaks through so many different cultures and traditions, and to remember that those are the essence of truth is not housed in one home.
Right.
It's housed everywhere. And
capital T truth can be found ubiquitously throughout the traditions and the cultures.
It's everywhere.
Because that's what capital T truth means.
Right.
And that lowercase t truth is our version of it.
And there may be some good stuff in there, but we don't own it.
Right.
And so when we go through crisis, sometimes it's refreshing to remember that the essence of who we are as honorable, good, noble, service-oriented children of divine parents, that's sort of capital T truth that you can really find evidence of everywhere you go. And then we don't have to engage in toxic or destructive behaviors, just to sort of, give the finger to the church. So, okay, last but not least, let's go to the very final recommendation that they offer. And that is this: to put those in faith crisis to work. I kind of don't like the way they say that. I find myself really micromanaging, I wasn't on this committee, so I need to just hold my opinions to myself. But I think what they're trying to get at here is that what people want to do is they want to feel like they're making a difference in the world. And we're wired to want to be in connection and to be meaning making. And so the insights that they give here, which is I think the essence of what they're trying to say is that people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And they want to do something that brings about meaning and making the world better. So this is their insight. A significant number of faith crisis members wish to stay engaged in the church and to contribute. And then another point that they give is both faithful members and members with doubts are drawn to providing Christ-like service to their fellow men and women inside or outside of LDS communities. So the strategy here, of course, is just to recognize that this is a God-given instinct in most of us, maybe all of us, that we want to give, we want to participate, we want to serve, we want to sort of make the world a whole, and we want to come together as a world community. So their strategy basically is to just help people feel like no matter what their beliefs are, whatever the dogmas are, whatever the problems and the trauma and the stresses, maybe if we could put that aside from time to time and just fill ourselves with the Spirit of God through service, that in some ways may in and of itself be at least temporarily healing. Mm-hmm. So the tactics that they offer are leverage church resources to facilitate, and this is important, they said here, outward-facing compassionate service projects, meaning we don't need to be just serving ourselves, and be very generous. And our church does a good job of this, I think. Go outside of ourselves and really participate in service projects throughout the community and throughout the world, and invite members in struggle and others, right? Invite everybody to assist in organizing and participating in these efforts. Next is identify regional faith crisis leaders who can assist and strengthen members experiencing faith crisis. And finally, the recommendation here is perhaps we could create a by invitation Sunday school curriculum or ongoing family home evening support groups aimed at ministering to members in crisis. Okay, so let's just go ahead and I will review these just very, very quickly. So the first one is close the information gap. Number 2 is console individuals in faith crisis. Number 3 is support families in faith crisis. Number 4 is provide pastoral counsel to doubters. And number 5 is put those in faith crisis to work. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just close the way I opened in the first of this series. I read this quote, and I want to go ahead and read it again because I think it's huge and it matters a ton. This is what the faith crisis team says. Although a daunting challenge, the wrong approach would be to do nothing to address the faith crisis epidemic. The longer we wait, the more difficult and complex the challenge will likely become. Urgency is needed, but it should also be acknowledged that there is a risk in publicly recognizing that such faith crisis issues exist. Some saints who might never have known these faith-eroding issues may become vulnerable when these issues are publicly examined. Some argue that we should promote what is called a, quote, faithful history, unquote, and sanitize the past and repress or even cover up discrepancies between an arranged or constructed historical narrative and historical and scientific facts. While upsetting vulnerable members is a risk, it can be ameliorated by presenting troubling issues in a careful, open, and even faithful context. That is, by demonstrating that a mature faith can and should allow for error, mistakes, and a full range of human culpabilities that results from agency. One could argue that such a healthy approach diminishes dishonesty and hypocrisy and allows for individual saints to face their own failings and imperfections with greater honesty and candor, thereby producing greater emotional and spiritual health. If the brethren and the institutional church can set the example that it is possible to face troubling issues openly and honestly, it will enable members, weak and strong, to do the same. The alternative is to continue to pretend that these issues do not exist and to be defensive about them, and thus continue to lose some of the church's best and brightest and most spiritual members. That this problem is challenging does not mean that it is unsolvable. There are many, including this team, who are ready to help the church design and implement an approach for addressing this issue in a way that both strengthens the church and helps it fulfill its divine destiny. Okay, I'm going to just riff off of that last paragraph. I'm closing the quote now. Sorry. Back to my voice, Valerie. Okay, so what I'm just here to say is this as I close. It says here, this is a problem. Though it is challenging, it does not mean it is insolvable. There are many who are ready to help the church design and implement an approach for addressing these issues. The many include us, you guys. The many, that they include you and me, who are addressing the issue, tackling it, trying to navigate the complex waters of somehow being in some kind of a connection with this church, while also being in deep connection with our own integrity and with our heavenly parents. And so what is it that you and me can do? I know Nathan and I are here. We're doing a podcast. We're talking about this a couple of times a week. I'm restructuring my private practice to run groups to help you, to help you have the support that you need, to help you have the information that you need, to help you get stronger spiritually so that you can go out there into your world and your community and your family and have the courage and the words and the strength and the determination and feel and know how very much you are actually on God's errand in this very challenging kind of experience that you're having. So those are the things that we can do. We can do podcasts. We can talk to friends. We can talk to families. As you know, I'm not going to pressure you into something that you're not ready for, but I want you to just think about what you can do to forward the cause of actually healing faith crisis. Something else that you can do is you can share this series with as many people as you know. I want you to share all of the episodes. I'm like a broken record for those of you who are old enough to know what that even means. But I ask you to do this every single week, but this is a big one. This series is so important. If we all had a better understanding, not only of the problem, but the solutions to the problem, maybe we could start as a community to turn the needle and to help our church heal itself and to become truly an instrument in the hands of God and bringing people back to the presence of God and of Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm done with this series, you guys. I'm grateful to be here with each of you. So grateful for the responsibility that I feel called to be here with you, to walk you through your mornings, your afternoons, your evenings, to help you feel closer and help you recognize that you can be closer to God, that you can understand and make sense of your own experiences, to wrap words around feelings that you've had that you haven't quite understood. I've gotten so much feedback from you that that's what's happening. It fills my heart. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for your feedback, your reviews, your ratings, your emails, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.